Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For any of you that have gone through darkness in your life, you know full well how challenging this process can be. For me, one of the most challenging aspects of these times when I find myself in darkness is ensuring I am committing to seeing this darkness as happening for me rather than to me. I have seen so many people fall victim to their victim mentality in these times, and to be honest, it can be extremely hard not to. However, if we are able to rise above that darkness and see it happening for our greater good, unbelievable magic can open up in our lives. Today's guest on the show is a man who knows this topic of darkness well in his life. From battling addiction and almost losing his life multiple times, to overcoming his addictions by going after the root causes of these addictions and leveraging the wisdom of plant medicines to assist in that process, it's safe to say that he knows a thing or two about how to navigate this process successfully. In today's episode, we will be diving into his journey, including his stories that will shock you, make your spine shiver, and leave you with a deep sense of empowerment in how your own life can be related to his hero's journey, and much, much more. So please, help me in welcoming my man, Kristian Hval, to the show. Kristian, my man. Dude, I am so excited to have you here with me today, brother. I hope you're having an amazing day. You know, for everyone listening, just like I said in the intro, like Kristian and I connected a while back, and hearing his story of a lot of the things we're going to get into today about overcoming addiction, you know, tapping into healing, creating awareness, like these things are really near and dear to my heart, right? I've had many family members that have gone through their battles with addiction. I've gone through my own ones with, you know, cannabis in the past and nicotine and things like that, caffeine, nothing too crazy, but I know a little bit about that world for sure. So, Kristian, I'd love if you could open it up, man, with giving us a little bit of your story, man. Like, you know, of course, we're on a podcast called This One Time on Psychedelics, right? So, like, if we can really hear, like, a little bit of the story about getting into, you know, certain substances, getting clean from them, and just laying a great framework for the rest of our conversation, man. I'd love to hear that.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really excited to do this and really excited to just connect with you. So let's get into it, man. Yeah, I kind of entered a dark period of my life for about 15 years, starting when I was around 12. And I've always been a pretty sensitive guy, especially as a child. And I found that a lot of wounded people were kind of naturally attracted to me from a young age. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't have the skills or the tools necessary to cope with that. And my natural tendency was always to just try to help these people. And oftentimes it was women. You know, I always had a female partner growing up, and these wounds and, you know, damaged interactions that these women had, they were just naturally drawn to me. And I think that's part of where this darkness started. Is around that time in my life, I had a traumatic accident where I smashed my face on some stairs and broke my front tooth. And being somebody with that level of sensitivity and low self-esteem, and then not having a tooth in there for like 7 years, that was really tough for me. And, you know, kids are mean. They make fun of you and stuff. And so I was like very fragile, and I kind of lost my confidence at that point. And that was basically the start of this 15-year dark period that took me farther and farther down into insecurity and ultimately addiction to a variety of substances, including alcohol, cocaine, and the big one for me was opiates. That really took me into a place of really not being myself and hiding. It was the only thing that made me feel okay, was the opiates. And so, you know, nobody ever sets out to become addicted to a substance. You ultimately kind of start experimenting with it. And then the next thing you know, you wake up and you're sick if you don't have it. And so that's what happened to me. Is I was physically addicted and emotionally addicted, and it was essentially my God. I didn't have much of a spiritual connection. I mean, growing up, I grew up Catholic, but there was no substance there for me. None of it really clicked. And when I participated in that opiate high, it was like everything was okay. It was like a warm hug. And I felt like I could handle anything. I could handle social situations. I could do things that normal people already do for fun, like dance and socialize. Before the opiates, that was really hard for me. I had a lot of social anxiety and just a lot of general discomfort anyway. And when I started using the opiates, all that went away and I felt like I could do anything. And, that lasted for a number of years in my early 20s. I'm the oldest of 5 children. I had a really loving household. Both of my parents were amazing parents and gave me everything I needed. And basically what happened is I was stealing and doing some really shady things to maintain my habit. And my dad, he's so loving and so caring, and he's an emergency room physician. He dealt with addicts all the time. And so this was really crushing to him when I had to finally reveal that I was addicted. And my parents basically gave me an ultimatum. They said, you can move from our home here in Spokane, Washington, and go live in this 6-month intensive inpatient program here in Boulder, Colorado, right around where I live now, or you're not allowed to see your siblings anymore. And that crushed me, man. I love my siblings so much. And I just broke down crying and I said, I'll go to rehab. I can't live without seeing my best friends, my siblings. And that's what led me here to Colorado. And in that program, I met a number of people who really helped me. And I did get sober there, but I wasn't done, man. After that rehab, I was like, even in the rehab, I was like, I'm definitely getting high after I get out of here. I just got to make it through this program and try and get my life together. But I had no intentions of being sober. And I didn't. Some of my worst times happened after the rehab. I got back into opiates. I got back into heroin. I really got into alcohol too, because there was just this deep wounding that happened in those younger years that left me feeling really like there's a piece missing. And I kept searching and searching and searching and looking for something to fill that void in my heart. And for a long time, it was substances and promiscuous sex and like these type of meaningless Band-Aids for that wound that I was feeling in my heart. And that went on for a couple of years after the rehab. I saw a number of friends die. I witnessed a friend, I found him with a needle sticking out of his arm and choking on his tongue, and horrible things like that, I'd experimented with psychedelics recreationally, as many people in our generation have. That was kind of my introduction to it. And looking back, I had some experiences that with my mind now could have been very mystical and enlightening, but I had no context for that. And so through meeting with a woman I met at that program who was a therapist and a psychic healer, I worked with her weekly for about 3 years. And she really, really helped me uncover some of these issues that I was having with the wounding and with the dependency. And one of the things that I really resonated with her about was she didn't care if I explored my consciousness. She wasn't like, you need to be sober in order to get through this. She allowed me to explore altered states of consciousness. And I started doing that in a conscious way. And she was my guide as like an integration therapist, and also helping keep my energies in alignment. Because as somebody who was severely addicted, I wavered a lot. I would feel really good and do things that were in alignment with a healthy life. And then I would kind of fall back into drinking really heavy and taking way too much MDMA and that type of thing, you know. So I started kind of exploring psychedelics in a conscious way. And actually, let me just take a step back from there, if that's okay.
Totally.
Because this part of the story is very relevant. I kind of got involved with some bad people around that time. And I started selling cocaine. And, you know, I was partying a lot, enjoying the party lifestyle, still kind of trying to figure it out, but I started selling this cocaine and doing a lot of it. And the next thing I knew, I had, you know, DEA private investigators knocking on my door, showing up at my work, because the guy I was getting it from he was associated with the cartel and they were trying to get him. And me being the only clean white guy in the group of a bunch of, you know, Mexican drug dealers, they went for the lowest hanging fruit. And they tried to get me to talk and tried to get me to give up my source and all that. And basically gave them the big FU every time and avoided that. But I remember getting an unknown call. They left me a voice message and said, if you don't come in and talk to us, then we're putting a warrant out for your arrest. And that was scary as hell. And basically after that, they left me alone. And so I was like, okay, there may or may not be a warrant out for my arrest, but they're leaving me alone. And so I continued on. I stopped selling coke, started kind of trying to clean up with this woman who I mentioned earlier. And then something really big happened. Back in those days, I used to love to drink like a bottle of tequila and take 4 hits of acid. That was my party time. That was my fun time. And I think it was because the acid was so strong, I needed to be out of my mind with the alcohol to really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so one night I was about to go out and do exactly that. And I looked up at the star Sirius, and I'd been struggling really hard. And I was like, please, if there's anything else out there, if there's anything greater than this, I need to know. Give me a sign. Please just send me a sign that lets me know there's something more meaningful than the way that I'm living. And I clearly remember that because I was really in a lot of pain. And I went out that night, drank my bottle of tequila, took my 4 hits of acid, and apparently I was even too much for my friends because they kind of kicked me out. And I had one friend who drove me home, and I got home middle of January here in Colorado. It was freezing cold, snow and ice on the ground. Must have been 2-3 in the morning. And all of a sudden I couldn't get in my house. I couldn't find my keys, couldn't find my wallet, couldn't find my phone. There was nothing. And it was dead silent. And in my mind, being in that state, I was the only person left. Mm-hmm. I was completely alone and I was terrified. So I freaked out and I kind of started screaming and kicking and yelling and nothing, still dead silence. My roommate didn't even wake up. I don't know why, but I kind of freaked out for probably 20 minutes like that. And then I decided, well, I've got to go find a place to sleep. And so I started walking to a friend's house who lived nearby. And on my way back, apparently somebody had called the cops on me. They were already looking for me. And 2 police officers stopped. I was belligerent and just trying to mind my own business, but they ran my name and said, well, you're going to jail. We've got a $50,000 felony warrant on your name. And that was it. They took me in. I spent a few nights in jail, and I'm sure you can imagine what a night in jail on a bottle of tequila and all that acid was like, but it wasn't fun. And that was the big wake-up call for me. Like, even in jail, I was like, okay, did I just ask for this? I was talking to the stars. Is this my answer? And I started taking it seriously after that. I was required to be sober, but I was like, I have no other choice. I have to figure this out, or else I'm going to end up back in here, or I'm going to end up dead or worse. And you know, I've been in the system I had been in the system for a long time before that. So I had DUIs and all kinds of stuff, but this was a big one. And it's really hard being in the judicial system. They make it really hard on you. All the drug tests, all the groups, everything you've got to pay for. And I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out, but man, it's killing me. It's really hard. And thankfully, right around the same time in Colorado, they passed a law that allows people who are on probation to get their medical card. And so I got my medical card for cannabis, and dude, I passed probation in 6 months early. Like, it made it that easy for me. I was like, thank God I've got something that can help alleviate this stress of being in the system. And so that's kind of my story of addiction and finding some solace and finding some serious determination to get healthy. And from there, I mean, that's when the psychedelics really started changing me. They really started acting as a source of healing and insight and awakening. And I'm happy to get into any of that if you like as well. I know I just kind of gave you an earful, but
dude, I was on the edge of my seat that whole time, bro. I mean, it's so funny, right? Because for anyone who's listening to the Kristian right now, or when the video is released, seeing him, like, you have a lot of peace in you, right? Like, I would have never known that you had gone through things like that if you hadn't told me, right? And so it really speaks to what I imagine a lot of the rest of the story is going to entail. But there are so many beautiful things in there, right? Like, recognizing that, like, yes, I have some challenge within me, right? Some darkness, whatever we perceive it as. And then being able to successfully move through that. And like, Joseph Campbell states, right? In the cave you fear most to enter holds the treasure you seek most, and also within there, choosing to see even challenges as happening for you, right? Like when you're sitting in jail and you're like, is this what I asked for? Even to be able to contemplate on that and like, ask that question takes a metric fuck ton of courage and strength and belief in yourself, right? Belief in God, belief in, in the universe and the way of the world. Like, it takes a lot of that in there. And, I'd be really curious to hear also, I know you mentioned a little bit of it too, but, this is one of the big things I've noticed surrounding AA and NA, right? Is that I am not for 1 second saying that they do not help people. I am also not for 1 second saying I am not grateful that they help people. But the thing is that there are many addicts that it does not help, right? Like, it's almost like, because for me, the way I look at it from a very hermetic perspective is that if addiction is one side of polarity, right? You're doing it all the time. You're addicted. You can't live without it. Then AA and NA are the other side of that polarity. And just like the law of polarity states, the idea is to find the middle way. Because for me, what I see AA and NA becoming for a lot of people is just another addiction, albeit much healthier than heroin, alcohol, cocaine, etc. Right? So that's why I'm not saying that it's not good. I find that thinking you have to stay away from things for the rest of your life, or you're going to be right back to like gutter or whatever, worst case scenario we have. That's not really freedom either. Like having to stay away and shy away from all these things, like, that to me shows someone still has a big wound in there and they're just gotten really good at avoiding situations that are going to bring it up, which again is a step in the right direction. But the idea is like, when you truly start to uncover those wounds, when you go through the healing process, when you are loving yourself, you can, first of all, you won't put yourself in those situations. But if you find yourself around someone, it's like, hey, you want any of this? You're like, no, thanks. Like you don't actually have the craving anymore. Like there might be a thought in your head that goes, oh, that'd be fun. But the thought that's a million times louder is the one like, no, I would never do that again. Like, because you've come to a point now where you've healed that aspect of you, right? Like one of the other things that gets me a little weary about AA and NA, because I'm a big language nerd, is people that have been going for 20 years, let's say, right? They haven't relapsed in 20 years. They still have to start every meeting with, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an addict, right? And for me, like, just like they tell you in NASCAR, you don't want to look at the wall if you're spinning out because you'll hit wherever your eyes are heading at. And so where you put your attention is where energy flows. And so if you're opening up with, I am an addict, as if it's the first day you're in AA or NA, that can be challenging versus I am so-and-so and I am in the process of healing my addiction. Like that could be an easier or like more accurate way to say that, right? We don't want to say that you're an addict, right? Like I get their perspective on it. I'm not saying it doesn't make any sense. I'm just saying, like, in terms of language, I think is a more empowering way to state that, where it still shows someone like, hey, I'm not naive enough to think that I wouldn't fall back into the old patterns if I, just didn't do anything and stopped coming to meetings or whatever. But I'm also not going to tell myself that I'm just starting and keep myself in a perpetual state of just starting, being fearful of like ending up at the wrong situation where there's alcohol or whatever. And so I'd love to hear a little bit for you on, as you moved more into psychedelic medicines and you started to kind of become this middle way, right? Like, hey, I'm completely sober from the things that were damaging my life, but I'm also not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and go away from altering my state altogether. I'd be curious to hear that part of your story, right? Like you mentioned, you got your medical card, and then you mentioned psychedelics came back in. I'd love if you could dive a little deeper into that, man. I'm curious.
Absolutely. And you said it right there. I love what you said about wound healing, because to me, addiction is simply just a symptom of a wound. That's a lot of people who become addicted are deeply wounded people. And until you're able to really start to uncover and heal those wounds, that addiction is like the easiest way out of that horrible feeling that you carry inside of you. And, it's just as Taoism says, whatever we repress is going to come back with stronger force within us or in our dreams, or it's going to be something that we almost obsess about. And what you said about claiming I am an addict, that's like another identity claim right there, but it's also a reminder of, that pain and that suffering. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot going through my mind about that for sure. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah. And, I did spend some significant time away from alcohol, that I think that can be very destructive, and it's become a bit of an ancestral celebratory substance for me now. But the only reason that I can do that is because I've healed. I was terrified to even like toy around with the idea that I could have a beer or imbibe in a beverage with friends. And so I didn't for a long time. And then eventually I was like, oh, you know what? I'm in control of my life. I'm never going to let anything run my life again because I love life too much. Not only is it about wound healing, it's about finding meaning in life and finding purpose in life. Those two things combined are what gives you the strength to overcome and still be able to explore. And it was through this process, and psychedelics played a really big part in shifting my worldview, because I've always been highly skeptical of spiritualism and God. I didn't believe in God for a very long time. And I know that word carries a lot of baggage for people. You can call it whatever you want. But until I really found that true, meaningful spiritual connection, I wasn't healed. The opiate was my God. The opiate is what made me feel connected. Now that I'm connected, I know nothing is ever going to stand in my way of enjoying life and being myself ever again. And that's something that, is really integral in the work I do as a coach, is helping people find that meaning. I can never tell somebody what their life means, but I'm very proficient at guiding them to their own wisdom of what their life means. And that's what I absolutely love doing with people. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, dude, that was perfect, bro. That was perfect. Okay. Because think about it this way, right? I say often, and this is not a quote I made up, but it just resonates so highly with me. If you know your why, you can bear any how, right? Like you've had many hows in your life, right? You've had addiction. You've had, falling back into addiction. You've had troubles with the law and things like that, right? Like if you don't have a why of why all of that happened or what it means as a result of you moving through all that, it's just life happening to you. You're a victim. There's no point to anything. There's no purpose to anything. And that's a very dark world to live in, right? And so what I tell
Yes.
everyone is, a lot of why I created a business called Highly Optimized is because as well as I do, as well as I imagine many people listening to this show, that if you are looking to do something in the world, right, whether it's be a coach, whether it's be a podcast host, whether it's to start a construction business, whatever it is, right, it's going to take a lot of effort, right? It's going to take a lot of determination, commitment each and every day to show up and be consistent, even when maybe you don't feel the best. I'm not saying to burn yourself out, hustle culture. I'm not saying that, but there are things you're going to have to do where you just got to thug it out a little bit, right? But why that is possible and why it doesn't become hustle culture is because it really means something to you. The same way that an artist will paint a painting and by the end of it, his hand is really tired, but he doesn't mind because it shows him the evidence of a amazingly done painting, right? Is the same way that like when I get to the end of a day and I've been on calls for like 12, 13 hours a day, and I have an hour to eat dinner before I'm supposed to be in bed, those kind of days, I love them. Yeah, maybe like some days I'm a little tired. Like I'm not perfect by any means, right? I have my moments, but at the end of the day, though, I'm able to sit in bed and go, dude, that was pretty cool. Like I can see all this stuff happening for me. I mean, even when Rachel and I work through challenges in our relationship, whatnot, we'll always come out of it being like, okay, what is the lesson here? Because we choose to believe there's always a lesson. And because we choose to believe that, we can always find one. Because whatever you choose to believe about life, you'll find evidence that supports that, right? Because we are the creators of our own reality. And I think that I'll make it personal. I heard that for many years and I believed it for many years, but I believed it from an intellectual standpoint. I hadn't embodied it yet. And so when you really start to embody what being the creator of your reality is, it's exactly what you did, right? At one point, you were stuck in addiction. You were in rehab knowing you were going to go get high, right? And now you're at a point where you would never get high again. And because you told yourself you were going to get high, abracadabra, that's what your reality created, right? It created more of what you now know you didn't want, right? But at that point, it was what you wanted, right? So you there created it. Now you're choosing to tell yourself a much different story, one that is empowering for not just the wounds you had in you, right? But it is much more empowering for your heart, your soul, these deep aspects of self. And because those aren't covered up by those wounds, you can hear their clear communication much more efficiently and effectively. And so it makes perfect sense to me, man. This is the stuff I talk about all day, every day. So I'm glad we're chatting about this.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I'm so in love with life now that I could never go back to that person that I used to be. It's a completely different person. It wasn't me. It was these substances and this dark energy that was kind of working through me. And, you mentioned Joseph Campbell. It was a true hero's journey. I went deep, deep, deep down into the underworld. And, I could tell you all kinds of things that you probably wouldn't believe about me that I did or witnessed. And all of that was so necessary for me to climb out and crawl out and really claim my life as my own, so that I can be of service to my fellow man and be of service to, others who may have gone through something difficult, who are on the other side of it and are still searching for that deep meaning. I really believe that that's everything. And my belief reinforces that and is reflected back to me in my life. And one of the hardest things to do is change your beliefs. Just like you said, your beliefs really do create your reality, because whatever you believe in is what's going to show up for you. And if you want to change your life, if you want to become somebody different, you have to change your core beliefs. And that can be a challenging thing. It can happen instantly, quickly through psychedelics or insight, or it can take a really long time. And it's often a mix of the two, as it was for me. And I would love to share a story that really instantly changed and shattered my previous worldview about spirituality. So when I was on probation, I had the cannabis, thankfully, and I was exploring LSD. And with the support of that psychic therapist, she was like, yeah, go ahead and explore, and we'll look at it together in the energetic space and see how it did for you. And I'm a pretty wild dude. I'll admit that. I'm pretty like, used to traversing the deep realms of psychedelic consciousness. And so I was like, okay, how am I I'm getting close to the end of this probation, and I want to go like celebrate a little bit. And so, Red Rocks Amphitheater is very near. It's about an hour away, and they've thrown some great shows there. But I was like, I'm going to go to a show with my buddy, and we're going to take a little bit of MDMA, and we're going to take some acid. And I was like really excited, really ready for that. But I wasn't. Well, actually, let me take a step back, because I guess that's a second story that's kind of related. Let me just go back, because I first had to kind of go consciously back into the underworld, and then I came into the light with LSD. But I was going to a show in downtown Boulder with my buddy on Halloween, and this particular Halloween was a full moon. There was a meteor shower. It was magical, and I was like, we were just going to take acid and go to this show. I had gotten some free tickets from my employment at the time. And so, interestingly enough, I had just met my current partner, Julia, my fiance. We had just started seeing each other. And at the time, I was like, really like, you know what? I'm just going to be myself. I'm playing music. I'm having fun with my friends. And that's when she appeared. And she also happened to have the hookup on some really good acid. So I called her and I was like, hey, like, can you give me some acid? And she did. We had just started kind of talking and seeing each other. She gave us the acid, and we took like 4 hits, which is a lot, before the show. And that, in hindsight, that was not a very smart thing to do, because we took it, and I got downtown, and mind you, it was Halloween. I was dressed like a girl. I was wearing a pink short skirt, a bra, and a blonde wig, and I had a big beard at the time. And my buddy was dressed as my pimp. And so imagine this, 4 hits deep. I just get downtown. I'm dressed like a girl, and it hits me. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I'm broken. I can barely walk. Figured out how to get my legs to work, and we entered the show and quickly exited the show because it was just too much. So, like I remember being in there, and I couldn't tell if this was in my mind or if somebody said it, but the 2 dudes in front of me stopped what they're doing and turned around and looked right at me and said, "That guy is tripping balls."
One of the worst things to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. It was not good, but we're like, okay, we got to get out of here. We went and walked around on the hill, which is like the college area of town in Boulder, and we started having the most amazing time. Like I've never seen geometric patterns just in the sidewalk like that, just constantly. And we had an amazing time just walking around the hill, being out, because there was so many people. And then my buddy's like, hey, it's Halloween. Let's go to the graveyard. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a really cool Halloween thing to do when I'm this high on acid. So let's do that. So we go up to the graveyard and having an amazing time and being very reverent. We had been meditators, and we knew we were walking on the ground of the dead. And so we were being very cautious and careful. And, there's hooligans running around yelling and throwing stuff. And we were just like, calm and serene and trying to tune in to the energy of the night. And pretty soon, some pretty strange things started to happen. We were hanging out, and I started to see this, you know how in Donnie Darko, when he's got that energy bubble that comes out of his chest?
Yes.
We started to see that in the air around us. And I was like, whoa, what is that? We were both seeing it. And we started kind of trying to like look through the bubble, and they were moving around a lot. And I was like, okay, that's interesting and weird. And all of a sudden we both grabbed onto this tree. We were facing each other talking, and we grabbed onto this tree. And I kid you not, I started watching his body dissolve. His legs disappeared. His arms started disappearing. And I'm like talking to him. I'm like, holy crap, dude, you're disappearing. And I'm looking at his eyes, and his eyes are wide because my body's disappearing at the same time. We're both disintegrating, talking to each other, watching the disintegration happen in each other and talking about it like we were lucid, And the next thing I know, and you may or may not believe this, but it happened, man. We both floated into the air. We both floated into the air, looking at each other, talking to each other. And of course we're going, oh, whoa, what? What is this? And I mean, I'd never experienced or seen anything like that, let alone talk about it with another person as it's happening. Sure enough, we floated back down and our bodies reintegrated, rematerialized. And we were like, that was insane. What was that? And we became curious. Instead of being scared, we were very curious. And we were like, okay, like we're entering some kind of realm here. Let's see what else we can do. Be careful what you wish for. I mean, we just kept kind of exploring that state and watching these energy bubbles in the air in the graveyard. And we must have spent 4 hours in the graveyard just because it was so incredible. And I watched my buddy kind of go into this trance, and he was waving around. He was non-responsive, and he was just like wobbling around, and I'm watching him, and all of a sudden I'm watching him grow old. His physical appearance, he started shriveling up and growing old, and he was kind of like moaning and making these weird sounds, and I was terrified. I was like, what is happening, man? And I watched him grow old, fall over on the ground, and his body basically deflated into this flat body on the ground. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? And so I was like, dude, are you okay? Are you okay? And I started like slapping him to get him to come back. And he would like breathe life and stand up and kind of do it again. And I was like, are you okay? What is going on here, man? Like, what are you doing? This is freaking me out. And
buzzkill.
Well, it was bizarre, dude. And I mean, he was like, no, it's fine. He just kept saying, no, it's fine, and doing it. And I had no choice but to just sit down and watch because he was obviously going through something. And so I watched that happen. I watched him turn old and shrivel up and fall on the ground and deflate probably 4 or 5 times. And I just sat there and watched it, and I had to let it play out. But eventually he got up, and we were like, oh God, dude, we got to smoke a bowl. This is getting weird. And I was like, I think we've spent a little bit too long in the graveyard. Let's try and make our way home. And so we're kind of just hanging out. We're still very high, just talking with each other, shooting the shit. And must have been 4 a.m. There's nobody else out there. All of a sudden, dude, we just hear this like crunch, crunch, crunch. This guy just walks up to us in the middle of the graveyard after we've had all this wild experience, and he's wearing a devil mask. And he walks up to us and he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Don't you know this is my turf? And we were like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm the devil, and this is my turf. And then he just walked away. And we were like, okay, dude, let's get the fuck out of here right now. And
oh my God.
So we got an Uber home, and we probably scared the Uber driver because we told her our whole story and everything that happened. And, that took me a while to recover from because it was such a load on my neurochemistry. But that experience really opened my eyes to the fact that there is a spiritual reality overlaid on top of our reality. These bodies are not merely particles. We're not merely these physical beings. I watched our bodies dissolve, for God's sakes, and we were still talking. How are we talking without a mouth? Yeah. So that experience And I was able to integrate and discuss that with the psychic healer that I was working with. And she helped kind of put me back into alignment because that was kind of some dark shit. That experience really opened me up. And not to mention, the girl who gave me the acid that gave me that experience is now my fiance, like, cause that happened. And I was like, oh my God, she's the only one I want to see right now. And she gave me this experience. And this experience opened my eyes so much that after that, I became obsessed with yoga and meditation and consciousness. I was like, I got to figure out what this thing is. I got to figure out what happens to me. I started getting up at 4 a.m. and meditating and really, really just like diving into it way harder than I had ever imagined was possible. And that led me to a really, really intense desire to just figure out my why for existing, So yeah, I haven't told too many people that story because it's so out there and so far-fetched, but it's really what happened to me. And I stand by that.
Dude, Kristian, that is amazing, man. And the cool thing is on this show, it's completely normal to hear things like that, right? Like, you found your show, brother. You found your show, man. Like, it's like I am fully well aware these things happen. I mean, one of the earliest memories I have was probably when I was like 3 or 4. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs in my parents' house, holding onto the railing, looking out and seeing like the Christmas tree, right? Which is like if you're walking down the stairs, you'd have to look to the right and stare out that way to see the Christmas tree. I remember I'm standing kind of like this, like, positioned the way that the Christmas tree is. I hold my hand on the railing and I levitate down the stairs. Remember it like yesterday, right? And I remember it wasn't weird to me at all. Like it was just like a normal day. And that memory has stuck with me my whole life. And I feel like it's been that constant reminder, even when I was never an atheist. Like I always knew I believed in something. But, when you're in high school and you're a thrash metal kid, it's cool to say you're an atheist, right? So I'd always say I'm agnostic. That was my thing. And I feel like that sign, along with some others, have been there for like, hey, just remember when you want to come back home, think about these things because you were doing these kind of things long before you got into this stuff again, right? So remember how normalized it was at that point. And it's wild, man. Like there are so many interesting occurrences. Like, I'll tell like a very quick synchronistic story. I remember I was at Electric Forest, a music festival that's in Rothbury, Michigan, right? It's pretty far from where I'm at in Boston. And coincidentally enough, I was on a lot of acid too. These things always happen on acid. Like out of all the psychedelics out there, dude, like the weirdest fucking things happen on acid. And I almost feel like somewhere in the fine print of free will, there's like a exception where they're like, yeah, unless you take LSD, then we're all going to fuck with you, right? All the spirit realm is just going to have full access to mess with you, right? So I'm at Electric Forest. We had taken these gel tabs that we had gotten, and they had different colors of these gel tabs. And we didn't realize that the ones we picked, the yellow ones, were actually a double dose. And so I had convinced my friends, my girlfriend at the time, because like usually on the first day of a festival, you don't take acid. You got to go figure out like the lay of the land, make sure like, you know where everything's at. But I had convinced them because I'm like, oh, we did one of these at EDC New York and it was amazing. But what I didn't realize at EDC New York was it was a day after I had done MDMA. And the day after you do MDMA, acid is like much different. It's much less intense. And so I hadn't thought about that when I had, like offered like, we should do this, And so we have a crazy experience. Like every LSD experience starts with, we took a lot more than we thought we were going to take. And it hit us a lot harder than we thought it was going to hit us. So we end up going back to camp just to like regroup. And we're at camp and a guy walks by. Our cars are parked right next to our tent. So he's like, oh, you guys are from Massachusetts. Whereabouts? So I say where I live, right? I say the town. And he goes, oh, dude, I live there too. And I'm like, that's weird, right? Like, and I didn't really settle into how weird it was yet. But I'm like, all right, that's weird. And I'm like, oh, what part? Right? Because there's like different parts of my town. He says the exact part I live in, right? I'm like, all right, that's getting a little weirder. Then I'm like, yeah, but what street? And he says my street. And I'm like, okay. Like immediately like paranoia central, like who followed me here, like that kind of thing. But it just ended up due to the at a music festival full of 60,000 people. This guy just happened to walk by who literally lived 5 houses down from me. I had never seen him before, but after that, I saw him at every show I went to back home. And it was just one of those weird things, bro. Like, what the fuck is that? And There was another one actually where my buddy Danny was at the Crow's Nest, which is in Lake Atitlan, and him and his partner took acid, and they were dancing for each other all day, both performers, and they were dancing to a very specific group, right? They were dancing to this music group, Desert Dwellers, which are one of my favorites. And so they're dancing all day, and at the tail end of the experience, my buddy Danny starts looking around at the paintings and whatnot and the pictures in there. And one picture really calls to him. So he goes and picks it up. And when he picks it up, he can feel that the backing is not fit perfectly to the picture. So he turns it around and he like takes the little clips off and he opens it. And there's this holographic card in there. He's like, what the hell? And he picks it up and he turns around and it says Desert Dwellers. Right. And he's like, what the fuck is that? Right. So like, these kind of things, man, there's always like, Jason McCarb, my buddy, he put it a very certain way. He's like, the universe is always flirting with you. There are all these ways in which to alter your state without even taking medicine, right? Like, for instance, when a song pops into your head, why does it pop into your head right then? Is it just random? It could be, right? If you choose to believe that, but it could also have information for you. If you meditate and you open your eyes up for 20 minutes, where do your eyes first go to? What do they stare at? What information is there for you? So it's so interesting, man, really thinking into all this stuff and realizing that there really is magic all around us, man. It's pretty fucking wild.
It's always there. You just have to have the eyes to see. And these tools, these psychedelic medicines can give you a glimpse of that. And, for a while I was like, oh yeah, this is my thing. This is helping me. This is giving me insights. And as I get older and as time goes on, I realize the integration piece is actually the most important part. You can have these experiences and they can open your eyes and they can change you. But if you don't fully integrate what happened to you and make it a part of who you are and somewhat understand what happened to you, then you can just kind of go down experience after experience and never find that grounding that is necessary to actually see the magic in your waking everyday life.
100%. That's what I talk about often. It's like, integration is where the real work begins, because what plant medicines show you is a depiction of what is possible behind your limiting beliefs, your current stories that are blocking you, et cetera. It gives you a glimpse, right? Think of it this way. It's almost like, let's say that you really like a girl, right? Or you like someone, right? If you're a woman listening to this or whatever, right? You like someone and that person says, hey, I'll go out with you if you run 10 miles, and then they give you a kiss before you start, right? It's kind of like that. Now you know what you're working towards, right? You're like, oh my God, I want to be with this person. Weirdest fucking analogy ever, but hope you guys get it. It's like integration is where you get to go, oh, I want to be able to hold that all the time. Like I want to be able to integrate that so my life as a whole becomes the psychedelic. And that's like what this whole show is about, right? Like it's about how people are moving through experiences, how they're integrating them, and what has happened in their life as a result. And you are literally a walking, spitting image of that, like showing people what is possible when you choose to go into that which you fear. Because like we always hear, the best way out is through, So, man, this has been amazing, dude. I would keep it from you for hours. We got to get you back on because I know this is only just the beginning of all the stories you have, bro. But Kristian, it's been amazing having you on, man. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they find out more about your coaching, all the services you offer? Tell them where they can find you, man. I'll have it all in the show notes too.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. And I definitely want to come back on. And, I could talk for hours too. So my coaching services, you can find at Modern Tao Coaching. That's moderntaocoaching.com. I right now I'm only taking one-on-one private clients, but I'm working towards having some group stuff and some online modules. I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/moderntao.
Dude, I love that, man. And Kristian, I always ask everyone the last question, or the same last question, which is, let's say someone listens to this episode and they get really excited to explore psychedelics in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would bestow to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing and discerning whether or not these medicines are correct for them in their lives at this time?
Ooh, that's a really good question and a really important question, because many of us find these through recreational source and in a really, unsafe environment typically. And I mean, I feel lucky that I didn't get into worse trouble with them in all the ways that I've taken it. So my advice would be absolutely find somebody who has experience and find a safe place that you can do it, and start small. Always start small. You can always work your way up and take more, but you can't take less once you've taken it.
Yeah. Dude, I love that advice, man. I say that at every Breathe with Cannabis workshop when people are like, how much cannabis do I connect with? I'm like, listen, you can always take more, but it's pretty challenging to subtract. It's not impossible, but we don't want to have to do that, right? If we don't have to, so that's extremely sound advice, man. And guys, I know you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. Make sure you go give Kristian a follow. In the show notes, we'll have his social media. Make sure you check out his YouTube, you check out his services. This guy is the walking embodiment of everything he spoke about here today. So guys, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love if you give us a 5-star review. It helps us get the show out to more people. And until next time, fam, I hope you have the best day ever. May the force be with you to infinity and beyond. Peace.